Jane, thank you for joining us.
Very pleased to be here, Matthew.
So what brings you to the World Energy Congress?
Well, I was really interested to be asked to attend because I'm not an energy specialist. I think I should say that at the outset. But I suppose the thing that I have been able to bring to this is that Wales is the first country in the world to have a Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And that Future Generations Act means that all our public services are required to think long term, are required to integrate outcomes, are required to be preventative, are required to be collaborative, which is a huge word at the conference this year, and really importantly, required to involve people about whom decisions are being made. And by making that legislation, which is linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, we're now in a situation whereby the work we're doing in Wales, which isn't even a UN member state, is work that's now being looked at by 18 other countries across the world, potentially looking to introduce similar legislation. And what we've done with it in Wales is that I have recently been asked to lead a very specific piece of work, independent of government, commissioned by government and one of the other political parties in the Senedd, which is the name for our parliament, to look at what 10-year pathways to net zero would look like according to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So we're undertaking that work now. We're looking at pathways from 2025 to 2035, which will be fair, just and nature positive. And in creating those pathways, we're really looking at how to make Wales more prosperous and more resilient.
So you obviously look at this from a different angle, through a different prism, depending on whether it's a food, energy, water nexus or whether it's the things that people need in Wales. Which categories do you look at and why do you look at them?
The kind of big four contributory factors in terms of emissions reduction are linked to four sectors, linked to the food sector, the energy sector, the building sector and the transport sector. And I think the really interesting thing about doing this piece of work at the Welsh level, and where Wales is quite a large country in land mass, but a small population, 3 million people, 10 million sheep, to put it in perspective, is actually saying, well, when we make these decisions about how you get emissions reductions, they're going to vary in different countries because different countries will have their own societies, economies, environments and cultures. And therefore you have to be able to look at this in a way that's best for any individual country. And that's been a narrative I've heard very strongly here at this conference over the last couple of days, that we need many and different paths. So you won't be surprised to know in Wales that our two big areas, which at the moment would mean that we were not even able to achieve our emissions reduction to net zero by 2050, as legislated for in the UK Climate Change Act, are agriculture and industry. Industry, very much, we have one of the main steel plants in the UK and we're not looking to get rid of it anytime soon, and I'll be absolutely clear about that. We no longer use coal for energy, but we do have a major gas-fired power station. We bring in LNG through the Welsh ports for the whole of the UK. We have a redundant nuclear site, but there's always a plan to reinstate it. But our natural assets in terms of both solar and wind are absolutely tremendous. What we're really looking to do is to see how we can help the people of Wales, who are poorer than other parts of the UK, but pay more for their energy, even while Wales is a net exporter, to get a better deal. How can we create the just and fair transition that plays to the Welsh strengths, but also tackles the Welsh problems?
So you go under the banner of Wales Net Zero 2035. Why 2035?
I go under that banner in terms of my role here as conference because I've been asked to chair that initiative because that was our commission. And I think it was a very brave commission by both the government and the parliamentarians because at the moment both in the context of the UN agreements about 1.5 degrees and others through the COPs, and also in our case through the UK climate change legislation. We're in a situation whereby many people will not start deciding on the actions that need to be taken until perhaps 5 years, maybe even fewer years before 2050. And yet we know that actually the science is saying we should have acted yesterday, and the second best day to act is today. So I think that commissioning us to look at, if we started now with the planning, if we, and what we're going to deliver to government in July, is pathways to net zero in each of those policy areas, and it will then be up to the politicians to decide whether or not they adopt them. But the really interesting thing about our working at this time is that the statutory committee in the UK that advises all the governments in the UK on climate change is currently preparing its evidence to give its next major report in February of next year. It's already said that Scotland's not going to meet its ambitions. It's already said the UK has backtracked under the government of the last 10 years. And I'm hoping that because they're working with us, that may well have some helpful things to say, that therefore the Climate Change Committee can say to all administrations in the UK about where they could best lend their efforts. And I think that's where our work could be important, not just in the context of Wales, but more widely, is about what plays to your culture, your economy, your environment, your society, and how can you do that in a way that doesn't talk about net zero that nobody understands, but how we make our countries more prosperous, more resilient in these rapidly changing times.
Well, that was going to be exactly my next question. What could the rest of the Union learn from Wales?
Well, I think that point about looking at something now, creating 10-year pathways now, those pathways may have to be elongated because of things that happen. Those pathways may have to be changed because we have new technologies, new ways of working, new collaborations. But essentially, the UN is still committed to delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And if countries lift their reaction to those, if they lift their actions in the context of their previous commitments, we will see far more opportunities for countries across the world to work together on these really important agendas. And of course the annual update through the Conference of Parties, the COPs, the next one in Azerbaijan, will know from that where we are, not just in the context of the IPCC report, but also it looks at what's happened across the world in the year prior to the COP. And we're seeing some dreadful flooding events, some dreadful heat events. And we know that all these things are currently off the charts, which used to be a phrase that we had to describe non-scientific based evidence, but now the scientists are saying these things are off the charts. So as somebody who trusts experts and believes that as those people involved in politicians and policy making need to listen to the experts to make sure that we give the best possible advice to our communities.
This year's theme is redesigning energy for people and planet. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's the reason I accepted the invitation to come, because if you look at the sponsorship of a conference like this, unexpectedly, because the money all lies with fossil fuel companies, the sponsorship lies with them as well. But I think that more and more the challenge of the outcomes of fossil fuel companies is being displayed much more clearly to the world. And it was really positive at the COP this year that there was this full recognition of the damage that fossil fuels do. So I think that if we can always use a conference like this to accelerate positive action.
Do you have hope that that's achievable?
I'm hoping that this is the beginning of a new phase of work on energy. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear people think about totally upturning systems. Instead of thinking about, well, if you are a major energy producer, and thinking about kind of almost, it was used the word unthinkably large amounts of storage that you might want to have and must have in the context of making renewables work as a base for the future. And then instead of saying, well, that storage needs to be in the countries that are making that enormous amount of energy, what if that storage is somewhere where people need energy? What if that storage is somewhere that enables whole countries, whole continents to get access to energy when they can't do it at the moment? So if we can start thinking in these really radical ways about the whole planet and the benefit for the whole planet of actually making accessible, affordable, just, environmentally positive energy available to the world.
Well, we'll follow Wales' progress with great interest.
Well, we may be small, but my book about all of this is called Future Gen: Lessons from a Small Country.
Small but mighty.
Small but mighty.
Jane, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.